Hello. And call meeting to order. And verify quorum present. Board Member Montoya,
Present.
Board Member So,
Present.
Secretary Wells,
Present.
President Haskey. And I am here, so there's four quorum. Okay, we're going to reports, update on the SAO flooding by Steve Carlson.
Thank you, Vice President Aspis, members of the board. I sent you a document, and I sent it via email, and I can give it to Sharon as well, so she can upload it to the board docs, however you want to look at it. And so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and kind of read and talk about just some real basics of what happened with the flood at Shiprock Administration offices. And then I do have our coordinator of operations, Rodney Armenta, and he's gonna, he was one of the first folks on scene, and he spent many hours that evening cleaning out the building, and he's seen firsthand some of the damage and then some of the reconstruction efforts, a little bit more than I have. But I'll go ahead and share some just generalities with you, and then if Mr. Armenta wants to comment on anything further, he can do so. And then if you have any questions, obviously we're happy to answer any questions that we can. And I do have some directors and coordinators online who might have some answers to some of your questions. So last Sunday, August 25th, Shiprock received a whole bunch of rain, and I got a lot of texts during this rainfall from some directors. One of them was Mr. Venturina sitting right there, but also from board member Montoya, who lives very close by and had some flooding at his house as well. And so I received some texts and some videos, and I shared them with Mr. Armenta, and he had already received some of those. But what basically happened is sometime in the afternoon there was just a line of thunderstorms that moved through Shiprock. Most of you probably know that Farmington was completely undamaged. Kirtland received a marginal amount of rainfall, but Shiprock was just hit hard with, imagine there were probably a couple inches of rain in just a few hours. And during one of the heaviest portions of that, there's a ditch that runs east of the administrative offices, and that ditch basically began to overrun its banks, and then eventually the sides of the dam of the ditch, or sides of the ditch, gave way, just sending tons of mud and muddy water just kind of hurtling toward the administrative offices. And that's what I have some of the videos of, and those are some striking videos, because as they hit the offices, the water was probably 10 inches deep-ish. The water that ran between the two buildings was probably 8 to 10 inches deep, somewhere in there. But it ran in front of the offices just as heavy, through the offices, the middle portion. And I don't know if everybody knows the layout. I guess I probably could have included a map, but there's Building A is where everybody checks in. Building A got some serious, probably the worst damage. Building B is behind there where the superintendent's offices are. Building B received much less damage. It only got through the door to the superintendent's office and to the public information office and to the assistant superintendent's office. So only a few offices were damaged in Building B. However, as the water ran between the buildings, Building C sits a little bit lower. And so Building C was tremendously affected as well. And there was water running through the halls of Building A and Building C, and that's what Mr. Armenta and several of his maintenance crew members came out and they were dealing with on Sunday night, was trying to get that water out. The water did go underneath doors and flooded the offices, so most of the offices in Building A were flooded, with the exception of the very end ones of ICO. That's Dr. Lopez and in her secretary's office, and behind there, it's the coordinator of community schools, Lisa Renner, her office. Those offices were spared at the very end, and all the rest were damaged. The gym itself was mostly spared except for the entryway. There's a little portion of the entryway with they're drying it out right now, and they're going to assess the damage. And C building, I believe all of the rooms were affected, and the hallway as well. and again, B building, just those ones that I mentioned. Just so what happened is Monday morning, after they were squeegeed out and the damage is being assessed, the insurance company was called. They came out and they recommended to Mr. Armenta a company, and that company, it's on your information here, is called Mooring Construction and Restoration. I think I just put Mooring Restoration. They began coming out on Monday evening, and afternoon and evening, they set up shop and began to assess the damage. And I know there's going to be a lot more questions on this. I talk about the squeegee and the maintenance staff and everything, where the company's from. But just to let you know kind of what they're going to be working on throughout Building A, if any carpet received moisture, muddy water kind of moisture, that carpet is going to be replaced. And so that's going to take a lot of time. In all those offices, the water was deep enough where it damaged the bottoms of the drywall. So the drywall is going to be cut away, I believe. And I don't know how they're going to piece it together. I don't know how well that works, but that's what they say they're going to do, is cut away the bottom, however much they need to at the bottom. And then they're going to fix the drywall. So the insurance is going to cover any of that damage. Also, the hallway in Building A, because of those tiles, a couple of them loosened. There's some water that got underneath there. They're going to replace, the insurance will pay for the replacement of the entire hallway in Building A. I believe the entire hallway in Building C, or most of it, along with all the carpeting in Building C. They're currently in kind of these stages. They have machines that are set up to dry carpets. I'm sure some of you have seen, those of you who worked in maintenance, you've seen these before. And they're there to suck the moisture out of the air. All the offices that were affected have those running, big fans in their offices, and with garbage cans full of water now, because they're getting all the water of the carpets. Once they're dry, there's a couple more steps. One thing I didn't mention in the report here is they have to, any carpets, underneath the carpets, they have to assess whether or not there could possibly be asbestos. And if there is asbestos, then it's going to take those of you who are familiar with the asbestos abatement procedures, that takes a little bit longer because they have to be very careful with every piece of it. They have to seal everything off on all ends of it to make sure that the asbestos doesn't get in the air and doesn't affect the folks that are around in the building. So all of that kind of stuff should take quite a while. So originally they said that it would take about 3 weeks to do the drying out and the restoration of all the sidewalks and the asphalt, all those kind of areas, and that the entire operation should be done in up to about 6 weeks. Rodney and I kind of were just agreeing right now that we think that 6 weeks is kind of rushing it, and we doubt it'll be that quick. Building B might be quicker because it's only the 4 offices. I forgot to mention Sharon's office as well. Sharon's just got a little bit, and she just wanted new carpet. So she told him, "Hey, come in here." I think she spilled a little bit of water right by the copy machine out there.
Oh my gosh,
I'm kidding. Of course, Sharon would never do something like that.
that's called vandalism.
I know what that is. That's insurance fraud too. So that's why I'm kidding. It was wet and it's muddy water, horrible muddy water. It's on camera. It's true. Anyway, so all that stuff needs to be replaced. On Monday, it did take a while, and one thing that I could have done better is when we assessed the damage, we weren't exactly sure of every single space that could be utilized in Kirtland, in Building B, which is kind of crammed now, and whether or not, like for instance, Dr. Lopez, if she could stay in her offices there in Building A. So we spent a good amount of time Monday trying to figure out, and there were a lot of folks that were very anxious. You know, I've been relocated, I've been moved. And we didn't always have a place, so that did take a little time. So, maybe we need to work on, if this were to happen in the future, or any situation like that, what would be some options? So, but, we did our best to get people moved, and we do believe that people do have a place, as you can see in the reports here. And I don't need to go through all these necessarily, but it talks about ICO staff, Building A, Human Resources was also in building. They're down here now at Kirtland Business Offices, and they left somebody there, I believe, in the front office of Building B. Finances, they are in B building, kind of intermingled with some special ed workers there, and as well also at Kirtland Early Childhood Center. They're just kind of setting up there, and they do have phones and computers that are being moved. And we can answer any questions about any of that, the movement of items. Building B, once again, only a few folks were moved. Sharon is still there. She's going to share an office right across with Rosita Batsilia, RC. And Jared is going to basically be on the move a little bit, but he'll be here. And Leandro is one of those folks he's got an office in a bunch of different locations, so you can always find Leandro. He's always there to help. That too, yeah. Building C, there was some equipment in the IT department that was damaged, and as well as in some other places there were some desks, I believe, that were damaged. Those are going to be replaced through insurance funds. One thing I don't believe I mentioned in here is that if you want to see something a little bit crazy, and I need to send out a memo to all the staff about this, there is a lot of furniture located in the gym floor. It looks like a maze in there, but it's a tight maze. It's hard to get around. There's so many offices that are just kind of stacked throughout that gym. It's amazing to see the amount of work it must have taken to move that many items. But that's going to be taken care of. Anything that is there is also just going to be assessed to make sure there's no more damage that we're not putting in. As everybody knows, most of furniture like that podium over there, most desks, they're built with like fiberboard, and if that fiberboard is touching any of that water, it'll soak it in and it'll ruin the furniture. So there is some furniture that's ruined, and as mentioned in here, some IT equipment as well. And I believe one more item, big item, is so the flood also affected the newly renovated field behind the admin offices. And I went there last week after I had toured all the other places, and I didn't really assess it super thoroughly. I just saw that some of the track had been washed onto the field and that there was mud onto the field. But I'm going to tell you right now, with the amount of money that we spent, hopefully the insurance is going to take care of all that to fix it. But it may not be as easily fixable as one of us, or at least I would think, because it's kind of compacted. The mud that flowed in there, it's not necessarily concrete, but it's very, very packed down. So there's going to be a considerable amount of work that needs to be done for that field as well. So, and that's going to be relatively pricey. So hopefully that takes care of most of the damages. Again, the timelines, we are Building B, we're just starting to move out. Building A is completely moved out, I believe, in the places that need to be. And C, they're still moving out as well, because it needs to dry out more. But again, Mr. Armenta, I don't know if you want to stand up and, you can add to that or fill in any missing pieces I might have had. But again, I appreciate all your work. Mr. Armenta has been extremely receptive and responsive. I've done a really good job of pulling his people together and working to make sure we're helping out with the restoration and cleanup efforts. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carlson. Thank you very much. And thank you, board members, Vice President Haskey, Secretary Wells, Board Member So, Board Member Montoya. Everything that Mr. Carlson said is spot on as to the events and how it occurred. The problem with not only the water that came in was the amount of silt that was with it, and it just got into everything. The company, the restoration company, has assured us that at the end of this, they will come in and do all the testing necessary with air quality and making sure that there's no residue of any type of mold or anything. They will make sure we will get a seal of approval for that building to be occupied and be healthy. That was the number one concern, and that's why we wanted to make sure. I think y'all, some of you know the layout of C building, how the back of it where the maintenance department where, we had stored a bunch of our filters throughout the district. The water got back there, so we've documented everything that got damaged with water. The insurance adjuster went and got pictures of a lot of it. Before we touched a lot of it, they came to take pictures, and we got a lot of good documentation. And every department throughout A building, from the IT, the human resources, the ICO, the finance, the payroll, the AP, everybody pitched in. It was truly amazing to see. It was chaotic because there was a lot, and there was a lot of stuff to move, but like Mr. Carlson said, the gym was good, and the flooring, was just the very front of it and they went in with the dehumidifiers, and they brought in the stuff to dry, to make sure the underneath of that floor was good at the gym. So once we assessed that was good, that was a good staging area for them to be able to store a lot of the stuff on site. So they went office by office by the number, and they took all the stuff out of the one office and put it in a section of the floor, and then taped it with blue masking tape and said, this is office 103, and then left a path to walk, and then this is office 104. So everything that, as staff was told to get their personal stuff they needed to work for the next 6 to 8 weeks, get that and take it with you, and then the movers were gonna move the rest of it into the gym. And we housed as much as we could, and they still had to bring some cargo containers to put the rest of the stuff in. A lot of the stuff from C building, a lot of the data and the IT and the computers and stuff that are there on pallets wrapped up and going into, and they actually were like, the stuff that we're gonna take to the warehouse for disposals and stuff, that they're doing the proper paperwork, they actually transported that stuff. Our warehouse was hugely involved in the whole moving of a lot of the equipment. Our warehouse pitched in as well. So the chapter house was very, very helpful. The chapter house was reached out right away. We talked to Michelle over there, and she was very helpful with pallets and stuff we needed from the chapter house. And then the Navajo Nation Emergency Response Team was there. Mr. Carlson asked, I was available to go, so I went and sat in. I sent him, that's the information he has that he's sharing with all of you. And it affected the whole community. It didn't just happen, CCSD, we were zone 3 of the 3 zones they had said. And usually the rainwater from that type of a rain would run to the north, and it always floods that way. And for some reason it came this way, and like he explained it. So we took the brunt of that wall of water once the ditches failed, and it came to our front door. So all in all, I think that we responded. It was a learning experience, but it was a lot of, there's a lot of components, there's a lot of moving parts. So, like I said, I think at the end of it, once we know that the building is safe, and if there is any asbestos abatement, or if there's anything that needs to be addressed through, they have a team, they have their own, team that they use for asbestos abatement. They have their own team with the moving. They take care of everything. Initially, when it happened, when Mr. Carlson called me, my first call was to a local company for a flood and disaster, but they really didn't respond as fast as the mooring was. Like, soon as the insurance got involved, like, hey, we have somebody that we use that takes care of this. So I backed off on our call and told the company I called, never mind, we're gonna use the company that the insurance company is sending down. And these guys from Placitas, they responded by noon. They were there and set up, and they had mobilized. So with that, I believe Mr. Carlson covered everything, and with that, if you all have any questions.
Can you, talk about the asbestos a little bit more? Under the, because I feel like with flooding, it's, the carpets that you're concerned about, but under the tile, what, can you talk about that a little bit more, what they assessed, what they saw?
Well, thank you for that question, and that was one of our major concerns. So of course, in the two different zones in Kirtland and Shiprock, we have members on our team that are trained to deal with a certain amount of asbestos, not for complete, big jobs like this, but they do their assessment, and we keep records of that. So we got with our maintenance department records as far as what we had for the building, as what was still hot, and what parts of that building, in our records, still was showing that there was traces of asbestos in them areas. And the ones that were very evident were some of the back rooms where there's still 9x9 tiles and the black mastic, which was you could see it. And so they were looking to see if any of those had loosened up, and at that time, they were still intact. The rest of the areas that were in question as far as whether or not they had asbestos, in our records was showing that a lot of it had been encapsulated. So underneath it was hot asbestos, but they had went back and put either VCT tile or carpet over it. So they haven't even began to start, because sometimes even the adhesive for the cove base could be asbestos. So they haven't even began to tear that back yet. They're still working on getting all the stuff from the silty mud out of there. So once they start, he'll let us know when they're ready to start pulling back carpet and stuff and start. They've already did the sampling on the drywall to see how far up that moisture had risen. That's, in order to start cutting into drywall, they gotta do their testing first. So I haven't seen the reports of the testing of what they found in the drywall yet, which a lot of that had been renovated since the original, when it was the school. A lot of them have been renovated, so a lot of that drywall and a lot of that, according to what I've seen in our records, is not hot, but they're gonna test it to make sure. And so everything that they assume, they will test, and then we will get a report, and then they will bring in that team, and then they will do their abatement process on that. The other thing, which we left out, forgot to mention, was that there's two teacherage housings right there that, to the north, that got damaged, got flooded as well. They responded over there with, we had already had that home abated, so they responded over there with dehumidifiers, and because we had new flooring put in that house and had a little bit of a renovation done. So we were getting that house treated, and they were doing the same testing that they're doing over there at A building and B building and C building, they're gonna do at the housing. And we wanna make sure that their air quality and that their home is safe to be, to live in. So we did have two teacher houses that were affected on that as well.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Those teacher housing are occupied,
Correct.
and where are the inhabitants now living?
They didn't have standing muddy water. It didn't get it like it did our office, but it was enough to penetrate and get in. And the gentleman said he just mopped it up, but now he could smell a little bit of them. So they brought in their dehumidifiers to bring it in, and they're gonna do an air test for him to make sure. And that was something that I was wanting to talk to Mr. Carlson as we were moving fast. As soon as I called Mooring and told him about that, they're like, well, we'll put them up in a motel. If it's gonna be an extended thing, we'll find them a place, because we have no housing. Everything we have is, we're full. So our next option would be to offer them, if it was inhabitable, then we would have put them up probably in Farmington.
Do we have record as to whether those areas were abated,
Yes.
or were they just encapsulated?
On the building or the home, or on both?
Both.
We have record of which is encapsulated and the ones that have been abated. In the home, the main home that got flooded, 310 right there, SAO, it had been abated.
And the offices?
It's just kind of sporadic.
Still to be
Still to be determined. And as they pull that carpet, depending on how long ago it was that they did the renovation, and when they built A building into the central complex, central offices, depending if they encapsulated that, and according to our records, a lot of it is encapsulated, either through the VCT tile or through carpet. We'll know once they're gonna start doing their testing, and I was thinking they would probably be this week. It's gonna be they're gonna start moving on that. Because not only do they gotta pull the carpet and then the co-base and then cut the drywall and then make them repairs, that once they start that, they had to test it first. So as soon as they'll get that, because it sends it to the facility they use, because they won't tear into the drywall or anything without knowing for sure if it's hot or not.
Okay. I know from, because I was over there when some of it was done, there was a lot of it that was just encapsulated, and abatement takes quite a while.
Yes, sir.
That's a time-consuming process, but, okay.
And that's something that we had asked them, if they thought it was gonna be more, if they would just do it all, and they were just gonna do it as a case by case as they went. And it was like, okay, it's like, well, if it's here, once they start doing the testing, once they go to start pulling out the carpet, if it's multiple, then they're just we'll just shut down the whole, like, nobody in, nobody out. It'll totally be an abatement situation for the whole building. So they're kind of gonna go off of our record of what we have and test. They're not gonna just rely on what we're saying is encapsulated or what's not hot. They're gonna go ahead and test to make sure. That way, when we come back, and the water didn't get above the 4-inch cove base, which is lucky, but it did sit on both sides. Once it got into A building, it was on both sides of the wall. We had water 8 inches deep on the outside around all of A building and C building, and then the water that got in through the doors, we had put rugs and stuff to try to stop it. It was probably 2 inches deep inside the offices. And then it took hours for the water to recede, where we could literally open the doors to squeegee out. It was like you had a wall of water to the north, and it just surrounded A building and B building, but it just did not get into B building as much.
My concern is that where there's carpet, you may find that the tile that's under it is actually asbestos tile.
And that's what they're prepared for. Yep. And they know as soon as they start moving that carpet, if it's friable, if there's any movement and even the tiles in the back of C building, way back where we use it for storage and for the maintenance department, it's way in the back. There's a lot of them, but they're 12 by 12 VCT tiles, and they don't have the black mastic. So he was just visibly looking at it, and us as well, like, hey, at least we know that's not black mastic under there, and it's not 9x9s under it. It's concrete and with an adhesive. So we felt fairly confident that the hallways and stuff, where the tiles, and like they said, they may replace tiles up to a certain point, and if the water didn't get any further, then they're gonna, like right there by the boardroom in Shiprock and right by Dr. Lopez's office and all that, that didn't really get affected, so they're probably not gonna put tile in there. They're gonna, once they get to colors and stuff, then they'll get with us to make sure that it matches accordingly.
Well, even, here's another thought, even if, there's no water damage in that, if we find that there's asbestos tile, I would hope that that would be abated. You understand what I'm saying?
Yes, I do. I mean, and that's something we can address with them as they're going through, because I know for a fact that men's restroom right there, when you walk towards Dr. Lopez's office, down the hall of that, and the water didn't get in there, that restroom is all 9x9 tiles. So, you know, it's asbestos, but the water did not get in there. So the insurance may not, they're probably not gonna wanna touch that. It wasn't damaged. And it's not encapsulated, but it's not friable. So that are the conversations that we, with these on a daily, they're there every day. The man running that crew, he's on it, and we're making sure that we're doing this. They're doing it by the book. They just come from Las Vegas and that last flood that was there, and this is what they do. We're trusting, and like I said, he assured us that when we get this building turned back over to us, it will be with a bow, and it will be done correctly.
Well, that's probably why the insurance company recommended.
Correct.
So your communication with the chapter house is what, have they said anything to, because I feel like the whole thing was made worse by the failure or the breach of that canal. And what are they planning to do?
That's a great question.
Because we can put the money into this and it could be repaired, then it could happen again.
That is a very, so the day on Sunday when it happened, and whenever it was on Monday when we got back there and we were, the team that was there the night that it happened, we could see where the water had overtaken that bank. We knew it was coming from, somebody's like, is it the river? Like, it was that much water. It was just an extreme amount of water just rushing in with no relief. Like, it wasn't, when Mr. Leandro sent me the video, he's like, it was like, I said, I'm on my way. We got a problem. It's just overcoming that bank, and it was just right towards our front door. So on Monday, our maintenance supervisor and myself and a foreman, Tom Smith and Jody Benally, we jumped and we drove around the backside by Chattanchoo where that ditch runs parallel to our building. We drove as far back there as we could get, and we walked it, and you could see where that water had, whenever it overran the retention ponds, and when everything filled up, and then it ran from there, it ran across the road, and then it didn't get into the culverts weren't right, and this is all part of that, in their report from the Navajo Nation Emergency Response, that when the water went to the ditch, and then further down, we physically seen it, and we took pictures. Mr. Smith has the pictures, and we took a pin and had dropped a pin where we were, where that ditch was blocked, and we could see where the water had rose and overtook the banks and where it went right towards our office. And we showed them, we told them, and they were supposed to have equipment out there with the Navajo Nation Emergency Response Team, and the chapter house had a backhoe and a front end loader. They were gonna take out there to fix that part of the ditch, but I have not seen if they had, and removed all the debris and all the stuff that was blocking the path of where that water should have went, which would have went all the way around us and then went out that backside to the south. And it just, luckily it missed all of our new houses. It came further north.
I have a comment.
Go ahead.
So that flooding originated north of the property where I live. And that same ditch that you're talking about runs parallel to the roadway, to the access to the house and the property itself. And it tore up the bottom portion of my road, to the access to the road. A couple $1,000s of road basin work that we did in the summer just got washed out completely. So I went down and reported it to the chapter to see if there's anything they would do, and they said they'll send somebody over once we fill out the documentation. And I have videos and pictures and the like to verify all that damage, but I asked about cleaning that ditch. I said, because at one time the BIA used to do it, and the I think it's a business manager, Michelle. I don't know what her position is. Is that what her position is? She said that's nobody's responsibility. I said, so you're telling me I'm SOL? And she looked at me, she goes, yeah. I said, no one's responsible for cleaning it? She goes, no, nobody. Wow. So the fact that they were down there responding because the culverts were clogged is one thing. To try to mitigate any further damage or breach of that ditch, it's going to happen again. I've got a sister-in-law who lives there. She's about 75, 78 years old. She said she's never seen it go over the banks. So that had to have been either a 100-year or 500-year flood that came through there, because it all came from the north. And probably about a quarter of our field was flooded, and it tore up the road. And then we know it just went down to where I ended up, and that's why I ended up going down to the administration building, because I knew that was towards the end point, and saw what I saw too as well. But as far as, again, from what I was told directly from that chapter house official, it's nobody's responsibility, so. And I don't know if the emergency management would do anything about it, because that's a pretty good little run to have to clean. And you could see how it took down some trees and a whole bunch of debris that's just from the top to the bottom. Yeah, so.
On my notes that I took the night that they were having that meeting with the Navajo Nation emergency response team that was there, they had a representative from every entity that was, you know, they had Navajo EPA there, they had the EMS, fire, police, the CCSD, some from the health services, and then each department of NTUA was there. And because the raging water that was running off that bank eroded the ditch so far back, it exposed a natural gas line. So once it got, the natural gas line was exposed, and you could see where the cathodic protection, the wrapping of the pipe was decayed, so they were just flaking off. So they had to go expose that more to rewrap that tape. They retaped that pipe to make sure that it wouldn't corrode, and then had to backfill it, which we had the sand from, or the soil from our new housing. They asked her, they said, yeah, you can use that. They tried to scoop up as much of the old mud and stuff as they could, but NTUA had to repair that gas line. And then and it was mentioned about the homes that were affected and the elderly and the elders that had been and what they had to do to get and we were lucky. I said, then we're lucky that there was no one was injured. We didn't sustain, there was, as far as we had heard, that everybody was safe, and they had removed some people from their homes that couldn't have access to their homes, because that was our next question, was bus routes and stuff like that, to make sure what of our buses are we gonna be able to get on these roads. And we, Cindy Theodore, our transportation coordinator, had went and drove the roads, checked that roads looked fine to be able to have school. So, and our schools weren't affected, it was central office. And like you said, the amount of rain that fell on that, they always said it, and even the chapter house said it always runs to the north. It runs the other way to the bridge, and it floods out that other way. And this time it came this way, and it did a lot of damage. Where that ditch where it overran the bank, it was, I would say, 12 foot deep and wide, and it filled that and just overran it. You could see where all the vegetation was just laid down, and it was moving.
I was standing there watching it.
Right.
So, again, I think, certainly don't want this to happen again, and I don't know what we can do as a district, you know, to safeguard those areas, and then especially the new homes. You would think that would have been engineered into those areas, but you sure you didn't see any animals lined up, paired?
Right, I've seen an ark. Yeah, right, yeah, it was to that point, seriously, when you all called and when he was there, it was a sight to see, and you knew the damage was gonna be extensive. And I felt horrible for C building, because we were so focused on A building that night. We didn't really, we looked at everything, it was just such, we didn't squeegee out of that, and it left, there's a lot of silt in there. And it just, it was just too much for it was already, the dam had broken, you know. So it was, by that time, it was just try to mitigate the damage, try to make sure that, you know, by things were sitting in water, and you got, well, let's get the power off, let's get it safe, let's get what we can do. And we had a good team that responded. Those that weren't even on call, they just knew, they'd seen the videos, they had heard, and they showed up and they responded. So we didn't do like an emergency, get everybody over here. It was just, by that point, it was so far. And we had people from transportation that showed up to help, and it was just, we had the backhoes and the stuff trying to get to control the water in the front. But as far as what their plan is and in their response plan and what they're doing as far as for the future, I think they're working on, and I hope for everybody's sake that lives near that they, as we read through this plan, what their future plan is to keep this from happening again.
Yeah, because to the north of the property where we live, the main irrigation ditch runs east to west. And then there's an intersect that comes from the north down. And that's that runoff wash. And some of the runoff, quite frankly, is from the irrigation ditch is diverted down into that wash as well. And occasion there'll be water coming out of there depending on the flow, but it was, again, one of those issues. And what makes it so bad is that it hasn't been cleaned in probably 50, 60 years, at least.
But we
And
lost
that's why you had what you had, is because of that debris. And once all that stuff started breaking from the north to the south, and right down there across from the Sinclair gas station where the Aussies live, right at that bottom, there's another main culvert that runs underneath the highway there, and they got hit pretty hard too, because all that stuff just gravity. So I hope they have a plan to work from south to north to try to mitigate and clean that thing so it doesn't happen again. But if they don't, it's gonna happen again.
Yes, sir. And we've been in good contacts with them, and I feel that the team that they have here, that's staged here to take care of it, I feel that they seem like they genuinely want to. They had representatives from Bo Nygren's office was here, President Nygren's office was present there, so maybe they'll get what they need. As far as, they have the resources, they have the equipment, and we literally sent them a pin of where it was, and they're like, we'll get, but whose responsibility? And that was our, we were willing to go take our equipment. We have a mini excavator. It's gonna happen. If it did it again, that's the stopping point, and that's where it's gonna rise and go over again. So, I haven't seen if they've cleaned it as of this week, but we'll drive out there tomorrow and see. We'll get a report to Mr. Carlson if they have.
And then what? If it's not?
If it's not, then we need to go probably have a little bit more of a voice over there with, the emergency team that's here. Because they have a full team here that's dealing with that from the EPA side and from, they've talked about some of the houses, one of the houses shifted off of the mobile homes. It moved. It's like, now you're talking about plumbing and you got a lot of issues. Is that house inhabitable? So they have a lot of stuff that they're working on that goes along with that ditch and the drainage with the culverts.
Certainly, I think the consideration from a community member standpoint of where it ran from the property and knowing exactly where it came from, being able to speak to them and actually show them the origin point of that and how it intersects again with the irrigation ditch, basically from that point south, is really where that remediation has to happen to clean that entire ditch.
Yeah.
You can't just do one section. It's a Band-Aid.
Right.
And they need to see that and understand that in order to truly fix that problem. So I'll be more than happy to visit with them and then take them over to the property and show them exactly where it started from.
I think that would be great. And I think that they're using Google Earth and aerial views, like, you need to be there. You need to go now. You got to see it now. So, I think that, the team that they have, that they're calling the boots on the ground, they were giving their reports and they were giving their updates but that was still, it had just happened. That it had happened on Sunday. This meeting was on Monday. And so it was still there was still a lot. I barely let them know that we've contacted our insurance company. We've got an insurance claim on this. Like, this is major. We've got a lot of damage. That turf field alone, because when they asked us if there was any upgrades we had done as far as to the property, like, yeah, we just put this walking track in this turf field in. That was a huge upgrade, and luckily it didn't hit any of the new house or anything. It engulfed a building and just went all the way. That walking track and that turf field was a lake. It was literally a lake.
Yeah, I've got a picture of it, and that was the thing, is I went down and checked on those houses, and fortunately, that water went, kind of meandered around it as it flooded off, but it went to that track and then to the buildings.
Right.
But, you know, I can understand their point of focusing at the end point where the vast majority of the houses are, and that damage is. However, you need to go to the starting point of that
Correct.
in order to fix that and clear that, to be able to try to minimize any other effects of another storm that comes through.
Very well, very good point.
Yeah, I attended a meeting there with one of the candidates, Dominici, and she was gathering information on, you know, some of these needs of Shiprock community. And the chapter president shared, and that was the first time I heard that, about the lack of, I don't remember that, that department that used to be there. I don't, water treatment, I don't know, but she did mention that there was a work group that would go around and clean those ditches, and she says, and we're having issues with that, and you know, I thought that is so frickin' true, you know, and but you know, it really comes down to money, you know, and I don't know when the powers up there or the leadership up there will realize that, you know, and want to be honestly and associate that the reason why they don't have money is because they keep killing our industries, you know, and a lot of, and even the people, you know, how this has cascaded down to lack of funds to different departments. There's just not that money there now. And then to, like United Way, Navajo Way, a lot of these industries had a big part in that. Their contributions were matched, you know, and employees' contributions were matched by the companies, and then go on, they flow on through United Way and then these different agencies, and now they're not there, you know, and I'm wondering when people are gonna put these things together. But if this happens again, we might have to consider just relocating the central office to here, where, you know, we don't have those issues of flooding.
Right. And I know that they had talked about, between the Shiprock chapter house and one of the other chapter houses, there was one machine to make sandbags and it wasn't here and it didn't work.
Oh, no.
So they are gonna have a new machine to make sandbags and have them readily available at the Shiprock chapter house, cause there was not a sandbag one and people needed them. And like for us, it was too late, you know, but what would that have done in the middle of the flood, you know?
I'm gonna get on a little soapbox here, and that's the problem. Again, the reaction, and to Ms. Asmus's point of the Department of Interior and their responsibility to the reservation lands, all of them, and their ineptness in being held accountable to their responsibilities. And it's not just that one flood, but time and time again, and the excuse of, oh, no funding. I almost said something I shouldn't say, but that's what really upsets me, is because that's the excuse, and to her point, as far as her grandfather used to clean those ditches because he worked with the BIA. That's how I know. They're the ones that were responsible for it, and the BIA goes away, and nobody does that anymore. Again, the last 50 years it hasn't been touched, and now you get what you have. We're very fortunate that nobody lost their life.
Correct. I agree.
So really, that's where it stems from, is in Washington, and the people in the state of New Mexico, the governor's office, and the Navajo Nation president's office putting pressure on them to hold them accountable to their responsibilities. That's really what it's about. And again, to politicize it, I mean, they send $100 billion across the pond. they could be using that here. So, thank you.
Thank you all very much. That is very good information. Yes, ma'am.
Got one more question.
Wait, where? Oh,
When they're doing the remediation, I know they were gonna wall off with plastic certain places where they're doing the remediation. Are they also gonna shut the vents? Cause I would, asbestos and, mold can travel through vents, so can we make sure that they also shut down the vents?
Okay, and we'll make sure of whatever their procedures and their, what they're gonna use in place to do that. We'll make sure we'll get a copy of their procedures prior to, because, you know, of course, everybody's seen when they, you know, if you've seen it when they put up the, but if they don't, cause we even asked them about Dr. Lopez's office, like, no, all that will be taped off, it'll be a full cocoon, like we'll make sure, and I'm not assuming that they're gonna do it, so we'll make sure that the vents are
Like in
covered.
a house, you don't
Mhm, yeah.
normally have vents like that, but in our buildings, they're also pretty old, so those vents connect to everything. And if they haven't already shut off the vents, then we definitely need them to test them for mold.
Right,
So I'm going to add to that. If I'm not mistaken, that same company is the one that did the remediation at Mesa when they had that fire up there years ago. And they would not release that building until they had a stamp of approval that it was cleared. And it took a long time. And they were constantly in there because I was working with them, because I was working in the maintenance department at the time. And they were very diligent about what they did and very meticulous about how they did what they did. And to the point of the concern of the ventilation systems, they check everything. They would go through and there would be a couple of complaints, well, I still smell this or that. And they'd go back and they'd check again and they'd make sure to get it cleaned up.
And we're not shutting down the whole building, some people are still working in parts of the building, so that's why I just wanted to make sure.
well, in a building, it's shut down. We're not, we've had some people, we had opened it up till Friday so they could get their belongings out of there. And some of the stuff, and like I said, IT went and got computers and workstations and got the best, if it was like little tables that were metal and that weren't, gonna be damaged, or tables with metal legs, we went ahead and removed some of that little stuff. But anything that was gonna be related to the flood and to possibly being replaced through the damage, we had the movers put it into the, on-site as part of the damage of what was gonna be replaced. So all of a building is unoccupied. But only certain of us go in there, like I've been going to meeting with them, we go do a walkthrough and just go check, but as they move further in, once it becomes, if it becomes, asbestos and they're gonna abate, it will be flagged off and it will be nobody's entering it, just walking in and out like it was an open office. Everybody has been redirected. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, board members? Okay, okay, we'll go on to the second item, B, comments from the audience on Title IX changes.
Can I move this to here? I noticed you had it taped, so I was worried. Thank you. I feel like I'm in church and I'm gonna sing. Yes, thank you. No comments?
from the audience on Title IX changes? Did you get any? You want to briefly go over it?
The Title IX policy?
In case we
Changes?
have some new people?
Sure. Sharon, did you find it? So we're going to go over the policy alert sent through the New Mexico School Board Association. And this is from Dan Castile, who's the Policy Service Director for NMSBA. And so in April of 2024, the U.S. Department of Education issued final rule changing Title IX regulations, primarily expanding definitions to include gender identification and things like that. And I'll go through the specific aspects of that here in a minute. But what has happened is about half of the states in our country have filed against implementation of these new changes. And right now, as you can see on this policy throughout, NMSBA has provided some draft policies. They aren't ready to actually recommend that these policies be implemented by districts, and so they're calling them draft policies as a result. And so I have some thoughts on how we might proceed with that as well, which I'll provide at the end. I'm just going to move down, Sharon, to page. I've gone too far. Page 5. Right there. So just broadly, the new Title IX changes focus more on sex discrimination generally rather than just sexual harassment, and they now refer to that as sex-based harassment. And I also think when they're using the word sex, they mean gender and gender identification. The second one is make clear that sex discrimination includes discrimination based on sexual orientation, gender identity, sex characteristics, sex stereotypes, and pregnancy and related conditions. The changes also broaden the definition of sex-based harassment to include conduct that is severe or pervasive, and not just conduct that is both severe and pervasive. The previous rule, the threshold you had to meet in order to have a grievance was that the conduct was both severe and pervasive, meaning that it was repetitive and a pattern. And so now the new regulation has a new standard, which is that it can be either severe or pervasive. The next one is that the new rules allow for a simpler and more flexible grievance process for handling sex discrimination complaints in K through 12 schools. This bullet point is actually an important one to talk about a little bit more. We have several sets of procedures regarding discrimination complaints and grievances, and so one of the points that Mr. Castile makes in this very long document, 97 pages, is one of the points that he makes is that potentially schools could decide school districts could decide to just follow the Title IX process, so you don't have multiple processes to deal with different types of discrimination. So that's just something that they. I don't like this. How did you guys find that? It was this big. Okay, ready for me to go back? The regulations or the new changes allow a single investigator, in which the Title IX coordinator or any properly trained person could be the investigator and a decision maker for the same complaint. And I think that has to do with staffing and, it being difficult to have someone in each position. Our model, though, is not difficult because we do have our safety department. They do the investigation, and then the Title IX coordinator can be the decision maker. So I don't think that really needs to apply to CCSD because we do have a really good system in place for that. The next one is allow for an informal resolution process even in the absence of a formal complaint. The next one provides specific protections related to pregnancy and related conditions. The next one is require the Title IX coordinator to consult with students' special education teams if applicable. This one is actually really important and a good catch, I think, in the new changes because there are often issues coming from a kiddo who has an IEP, and potentially some of the things or the behaviors may come from or stem from the assessment made in the IEP. So I think this is an important change. The next one state that in most instances in which schools are allowed to provide different programs or services segregated by sex, participants must be allowed to participate in accordance with their gender identity. Although the regulation does not specifically address athletics, that is what the issue is. And the issue there is whether or not a person born male but identifies as female can compete in female sports. And my understanding is that's the aspect that is creating the most controversy. The policy alert does go through several items that they want to, streamlined. So, Sharon, if you go to, just scroll down to, actually go back up to the contents on page 4. So you'll notice, just go all the way to the top. Yes, ma'am, thank you. You'll notice that there are several instances where you see in parentheses deleted. What Mr. Castile explains in his memo is that the reason he's deleting some of these or recommending we delete them is because we kind of have the same or similar procedures and discussion in multiple policies, and that can confuse folks. So he's recommending just to consolidate them into one. So where you see deleted, that's what he's doing. That one that says new ACA-EB is his draft of what he's recommending, once the controversy clears up to add in. And if you could scroll down just a little bit more.
you'll note that out of all of the policy advisories in here, there's only one new one and several deleted. So based on Mr. Castile's, I think, analysis, my recommendation to the board is that we don't make changes to our policies at this time until the controversy is settled. In each of our policies, we are required to follow state and federal law. And so if we were to make any changes, my recommendation would be that we add something very simple indicating that our policies comply to, something like to the extent allowed by federal and state law, if you were to make any changes. But right now, Mr. Castile is not recommending that we make changes. With that, I stand for questions if you want me to go to a specific policy. But right now, again, it's really just mostly changing and adding the term gender identity to most of those regulations.
So give us an example and add those in there, what you're saying.
I'm sorry, say that again?
Give us an example.
Of,
You said the changes would be to add gender and identity, so give us an example.
sure, let me scroll down. Where's that new one? Okay, so let's go to policy advisory number 247, ACA-EB. What page is that? Okay. Thank you. And so what Mr. Castile did here was he indicates that this new Title IX policy is intended to replace the existing Title IX policy. And the policy required or contains the requirement that all employees, contractors, and school volunteers notify the Title IX coordinator when they have information about conduct that may reasonably constitute sex discrimination. And then it goes into kind of what designation those employees are in terms of whether of them being confidential employees. If they're confidential employees, it provides a means for students or others to talk to someone about sex discrimination or harassment, like a school psychologist, without triggering the involvement of the Title IX coordinator. So it's trying to create a safe place for kiddos to go and talk about these issues while they're making their mind up, I guess, about filing a grievance. And so this is probably the best policy that encapsulates the newest or the Title IX changes. All of those things that I talked about in the bullet point is what he's talking about here. And then, so Sharon, maybe we can find, but I want to say this first before we go. I want to go to the actual draft that he's given. But so in this bottom paragraph here, starting, I'm on page 11, Sharon, it says the policy also contains sections addressing the prohibited disclosure of personally identifiable information. There. So this gives a kind of a expanded list of what things have been, I guess, clarified. And so it includes peer retaliation, pregnancy or related conditions, program or activity remedies, respondent retaliation, sex-based harassment, and supportive measures. So it's just kind of going through and discussing how to define those terms better, because there was confusion in the past. And then, Sharon, let's try to find this in the actual document. Well, actually, Sharon, let's just go to that first one, A-0250. 17. And so by way of example, Board Vice President, you can see that the change strikes out in that first paragraph, race, color, religion, sex, sexual orientation, age, national origin, and disability. And the new definition is race, age, religion, color, national origin, ancestry, sex, sexual orientation, gender, gender identity, gender-affirming healthcare, pregnancy, childbirth, or condition related to pregnancy or childbirth, or reproductive healthcare, physical or mental disability or serious medical condition, or military status and spousal affiliation. And so here, actually, he's combining both the changes to Title IX and New Mexico's changes to the, what is it called? The, my brain just stopped. The Human Rights Act is what I was going for there, sorry. So the gender affirming healthcare, pregnancy, childbirth, condition related to pregnancy, all of those are coming from Title IX. The other ones, physical or mental disability, serious medical condition or military status, and spousal affiliation are state changes to the, to our state statutes.
So on a parent's standpoint, the, or guardian, how does that play in healthcare and pregnancy and childbirth?
So it would play in where potentially a child who is pregnant is receiving discrimination for being pregnant. So that could materialize as excused or unexcused absences related to that. I know that was an issue in the past that's been discussed. Whether or not they can participate in certain activities potentially. I think from a more controversial standpoint, it potentially brings schools into conversations that are really important for parents and kids to have about childbirth and reproductive health care. And so that piece of it is, to me, very controversial for school districts to have to actually be part of.
So at the beginning of this presentation, you said that it's being litigated.
It is being litigated. Half the states have filed for injunction.
What about our state?
Our state has not filed for injunction.
But Castile took it upon himself to rewrite it and get us to adopt this version.
No, he's not actually recommending for us to adopt it. As you can see on every page, it says draft, not final. I think what he's doing is helping us understand if we were to make all these changes, this is what it would look like. Sharon, can we go back to, I think, about page 12? It might be above that.
May I add something?
Yes, sir.
Madam Vice President?
Go ahead.
So in regards to the response from Mr. Castile and his suggestions, one of the things that I found, because I went through the entire document as well, and one of the points that he alludes to is the NMHRA, the New Mexico Human Rights Act. And that is a primary non-discriminatory law, which in 2023, the NMHR made clear that school districts are public accommodations that prohibit discrimination by governmental entities, which school districts are. And I think that's one of the intents of his writings, is because of that act, and it alludes to it on page 6 and 7 when he speaks to that, and that's in this section also for the advisory on 252, where he speaks to J-015, the equal educational opportunities. And he's using that basically because, as you asked the question of how many states, I believe it's 26, and New Mexico's not one of them, but because of that NMHRA and the non-discriminatory law that the state has in place, it really limits the ability of the school districts, because we take federal money, and so therefore we have to basically abide by the law, and it states that in the document as well, that that is the law that you have to follow.
And the other act, in addition to what Board Member Montoya was talking about, that he is kind of bringing to our attention, is the in 2023 Act, New Mexico's Reproductive and Gender Affirming Healthcare Freedom Act. So what he talks about on the bottom of page 9 and throughout is saying, we're not ready from an NMSBA standpoint to call this a final document. And so, for example, he has this note to school districts, and this is peppered throughout his analysis, that right now this is in flux. The state law part is not in flux. The Title IX part is in flux. And with respect to our policies, consistent with the state policies, I mean, if the board wanted to just adopt all of these, his recommendations, the board can certainly do that. If the board wanted to wait on Title IX and do the state pieces, we'd have to kind of figure out which one was state and which was Title IX, which I think would be kind of difficult because he's got them kind of packed together. So from that, and that's partly why my recommendation is that if we amend our policies at all, it's to state that all of our policies must comply with federal and state law.
So if I may add to that, on page 6, second paragraph, line 8, I'm going to read it verbatim. For example, the new policies and regulations do not address Title IX's regulatory requirements that a person generally be allowed to participate in programs or activities consistent with their gender identity, which is the source most to the controversy and litigation surrounding the new regulations nationally. Courts in our jurisdiction have not addressed whether Title IX or other federal laws require participation in accordance with gender identity, but districts should be aware that it is the policy of the U.S. Department of Education as expressed in these Title IX regulations, which typically have the force of law, that people generally be allowed to participate in district programs, facilities, and activities consistent with their gender identity, subject to certain exceptions. And then the note that even in the absence of Title IX in the New Mexico Human Rights Act provides similar prohibitions and protections for transgender people. So for New Mexico school districts, the new Title IX regulations are not a radical departure from the existing legal requirements related to gender identity. We're already adhering to that.
So let me just back up on that, just a little bit. Essentially, what Mr. Castile is saying here is what I summarized in the beginning, which is for most, school functions, making sure that there's no discrimination based on gender identity is okay. What he's saying through this is, without saying it, without bringing in athletics, for example, and hitting that square, that's really where the controversy comes from, because there is Supreme Court case law that talks about protecting, making sure that female and male sports are on parity, right? This potentially upsets that apple cart if persons who were born male then have a gender identity as female participate in female sports. That's really where this comes down to. So for the most part, state law already makes sure that you're not discriminating on the basis of gender identity, but no one's touching the particular issue of how that applies to sports. And that's why, my opinion, Mr. Castile is calling this draft not final.
Well, I wanted you to go over this, and because we have an audience, we have people on that, from the community, and you're right, it is controversial. And I think, it's not just in sports. I have an issue when a guy identifies as a female in the female restroom. And so I think it goes beyond, and those are some of the things. And all this wording, language, and all is that's why I wanted you to break it down to an example, and on how this is used, and I think we should be careful as a district, because if we're gonna go on that, because the state gives us money and funds us, that we need to do everything that, whatever's passed down, I don't think, why are we even here? Why is the school board here? Why, we talk about local control, we talk about our traditions, our culture, and if we go on that idea alone, then more stuff is gonna be shoved into our area. And I had some concerns when they wanted to put feminine products into the males' restrooms, because as I was taught, that's a no-no. And that goes back to tradition. And so I think, that we better be careful. And I think because of that, our customs and our traditions, I've always went on the thought of, you know, that, yeah, that you have some people on the other side of it that are saying, if there was more than one gender, or more than two genders, then, why is there just a male corn and a female corn, you know, in our stories, our paintings and things like that? And so it makes me wonder, you know, because you got a group of people that see it this way and another that see it that way. And so I think we need to be careful and, but to be told, you know, and I think it's something that we need to really be careful because, you know, we are unique. I question, you know, some people in Albuquerque and my sister-in-law and who's Pueblo, and their cultures, their traditions are not the same as ours. And so, yeah, I think we really need to be careful on this.
And just to kind of back that up, going back to the passage that Mr. Montoya shared with us, there's some key phrases in there I just want to kind of highlight your attention to again. And the first of those is that Title IX regulations, which typically have the force of law. So that is a very ambiguous statement. And what's being referred to there is usually if a department implements regulations, they're given discretion that they know what's best under the statutes to create rules for, right? So they're kind of given that leeway. But there is a lot of case law, and this is why the language says what it does, typically have the force of law, is because sometimes in a department will go outside of the scope of the statute that gives them the authority. And I would imagine that one of the consistent arguments of the 50 states that have pushed back on this is saying exactly that the department has gone too far outside of the scope of authority that Congress gave them. So I want you to focus on that key set of words, that phrase. It's cold in here.
Feels wonderful.
It is cold. Can we turn it down?
So,
And then
actually, you have to turn it up.
One more reference there that I think is really important to focus on, and that's towards the end of that sentence where it says, people generally be allowed to participate in district programs, facilities, and activities consistent with their gender identity, subject to certain exceptions. Now, we have not defined what those exceptions are. That is another very ambiguous phrase. And so from my perspective, if I'm, you know, thinking through this from an NMSBA perspective, those are the primary reasons why I believe this is a draft, not final, because of those kind of mushy areas. And so what I'm saying is I absolutely agree with you, Vice President, that we need to be extremely careful in how we make changes to our policies.
So,
Comment
Go ahead.
to who?
no, go ahead. Go ahead and make yours. I can wait.
That's exactly why I think that we need to back away until this is hashed out and we know. I think we're spinning our wheels at this point, because we don't know where they're going to go with it. We don't know where it's gonna settle. So I think that the best thing to do is to be careful, but back away from this until, and I think that's what Mr. Castillo was cautioning us, leave it alone until we know where it's going to settle.
I absolutely agree with you, Board Secretary. The other thing that I would add to that is that what Mr. Castillo has done for us is also to give us a roadmap. an informal roadmap to make sure that internally, we know how to comply with these new changes without, actually putting them into policy yet, because we're required as a district to follow state and federal law anyway. And so I just wanted to point that out, that he does a very good job at helping us create that roadmap, so we don't have to do it.
Anytime, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Finish your thought, please.
Anytime that you accept federal funds, you accept the strings that are attached. And we are funded federally and state, so regardless whether we like it or not, we are subject to those connections, to those attachments. That's the danger, of accepting federal funds. But we're in a position where we have no choice, we have no option, so we have to abide by the strings that they attach. I'm sorry, go ahead. Mr.
No,
Montoya.
thank you. To your point, Mr. Powell, about the ambiguity, one of the other challenges is and I pulled this from an article that I was reading in regards to that. The challenge by the states is the section that expands protection for transgender and gender non-binary students, that allow them to use restrooms of their gender and, here's the pull word, expect their pronouns to be respected within the educational environment. So the argument there is that when that's the case and they're expected to, then the children's rights, the other children's rights to free speech are being infringed upon. And again, to the point of a lot of these lines and sentences that were constructed in the document, and I actually went through and started pulling up some of the responses from the general public and the challenges that they're making. And then the Department of Education's response and their disagreement, again, their disagreement with what the people are saying in regards to the challenges that they're making. And to me, that's one of them in the aspects of the free speech. I mean, they're expecting others to believe what they believe. But then at the same time, I found a quote from Secretary Cardona. Everyone has a right to schools that respect their rights and offer safe and welcoming learning environments that works both ways. It's not a one-way street. It works both ways. So he in himself is acknowledging that, but he's speaking to the rights of, again, the transgender students and the non-binary students, but that's where he's using that one. But again, those words can turn right back around to state very clearly that it works both ways.
That's what I wanted to say, is who speaks for the general public? Who is here to say that, what about their rights? What about that student, that goes into the restroom and expects to see of their own gender, not somebody that identifies? What about their rights? Who's speaking for them? And so, yeah, and then on top of that, I'm unlike most. No, I don't settle because we are funded by federal government. If they want to move to, what if those families want to just pick up their children and take them to a charter school or a private school? That because of these things that are happening, that are being cascaded down, and it's clearly political. But again, I just go back to who's defending that side of it, who's saying, everybody else has been over the past years, defending this other side. Then we hear of, nationally of, especially in athletics, how the the, how the athlete is more, I don't know, it's just it's not even, so it's then that people wake up. And then too, when it happens to you, I had a niece that was in college and everything was fine. She was, you know, accepted that her RA was gay and identified as a female, and until a grown man is who she saw standing over her in just underwear. Until it happens to you, then I think that's when people start rethinking and looking at this issue. And she didn't know what to do. She was so scared. And this is a RA, this is somebody that has keys, and she had to move out of there right away. So, I don't know if this item is for vote.
It does have an action item attached to it. Yes, you can vote on it.
I'd like to vote,
Hold on,
Separately?
just a moment. I haven't made my comment yet.
okay, go ahead.
So I understand the recommendations. I also know that we can let our audience know if they disagree with Title IX, they can contact the United States Department of Education because that's where it's coming from. As a school district, we have to remember federal funds is Title I's all the way through Title VII, which includes impact aid. So all our federal funds, our state funds, and it's not just with us, the charter schools, all those also receive federal funds. So it's going to be across the board, except maybe a private school or parochial school. And so I'll go off the recommendations that legal counsel has made to just make the recommendations of changing those minor things. But, you know, I think I vocalized my opinion on this also, that I was not too thrilled about this, but I guess we'll just have to see what comes of it. But I'll go off the recommendations again, like I said earlier, just now, that with the gender. Thank you.
Okay, I was just asking about separate vote, not just to, because just individual, when it comes to it.
Mhm.
Okay,
You're not making a motion, is that what you're saying?
when it comes to it, when we get there. I think the next item is still on this and,
It's all tied in the same.
okay. So, any other questions, discussions, remarks? Mr. So, are you still with us? Item C?
Can you hear me?
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, so.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes,
Yeah, I think my comment on this is I'm actually comfortable with the recommendations put forth by legal counsel. For me, I look at this from the perspective of really not getting caught up in the politics or all the stuff that's going on. I'm really focused on about trying to ensure that our district complies with the law with what it is. I mean, if there are changes, that's up to Congress and all the policymakers to make that change. Our job as board members is to implement what laws there are in the books. And it's a little bit unfortunate that we're caught up in the politics of this and that when it really should be about doing what's best for kids and protecting kids. So I'm willing to support these amendments. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions, comments? Item C. Report, discussion, and possible action item regarding the Title IX changes by Jermaine Chappelle. So I think we did enough of that.
I think we covered it.
So,
Move on to item 3.
item 3, executive session.
Do you, just real quick, does the board have any action on this item right now?
You mean a vote?
Yes, ma'am.
I motion to vote.
What is the motion?
To accept what you're presenting.
To accept making minimal changes that specify that we comply with federal and state law, but not the full, all of these.
Yes.
May I make a comment in regards to that motion, proposed motion? Because the 2020 rule really is the floor for this, and that's the starting point. So to make that motion is to adhere and utilize that floor from this point. And then to Mr. So's point, any changes that come from the challenges throughout the country, if changes are made, then obviously, and if it becomes law, then we would have to adopt that as the policy, correct? Through the suggestions, through the policy service.
Right, but even the changes saying we comply with state and federal law
Yes.
do that. All it does to put it in our policy is it helps us have our own guidebook internally for what to do. And right now that's in flux. So that's kind of why I'm agreeing with Mr. Castile at this point, that because some of this is in flux, we probably shouldn't go through the exercise of amending all of it until we know for sure what's being changed and what isn't. But the statement, we comply with federal and state law, is what we're required to do anyway. And right now, there's question about whether or not this is law. Does that make sense?
Yeah, because of the challenge. Now, if I may add to that too, I believe there's 6 educational institutions in the state of New Mexico and 3, I believe, high schools or secondary schools in New Mexico. And their response is basically going back to the floor of 2020 to utilize that as the guidance from this point on up until there are any changes.
I would like to do that. Because, I mean, I see no point in something that's still being questioned and litigated. And as I said, we're, you know, things that are passed down from the U.S. Department, federal, I mean, they're gonna have to start recognizing that, you know, the school boards. And that's only gonna happen is when we start standing up, because we're gonna have to be very careful. I mean, we come with customs and our culture, our traditions, not just Navajo, Hispanic, we have all of those. And as Board Member So said, you know, we're looking at the student, we're looking at both students. If there's that division, you know, and just looking one-sided, and all along, we don't even represent the other side, we're just gonna have to be careful. So proceed, or how do we do this?
Do you want to restate the motion?
Make a motion to accept and to utilize the prescribed and stated policy that is currently in place, without any changes or amendments, for the foreseeable future, and accept them as they stand and utilize those,
From 2020.
From
basically
2020?
from 2020, yes.
And you all have already adopted the 2020.
Yes, we did.
So I think the motion then is to continue to follow federal and
Stay
state
with
law.
what we have.
Yes.
Let's just say we're reaffirming.
Yes, you can reaffirm. That's a good, that's a good word.
Reaffirm the 2020 Title IX.
Until we get clarification from the lawsuits.
Yes.
That's long drawn out, but I'll second it.
So we'll vote. Okay, Board Member Montoya,
Yes.
Board Member So,
Yes.
our Secretary Wells.
Yes.
I vote yes. Vice President Aspis votes yes. President Haskey?
Question, before I vote, Ms. Chappelle,
Yes, ma'am.
with us abiding by the 2020 policy, does that mean anything in terms of us being in compliance or not being in compliance?
So the motion was coupled with following the 2020 policy and complying with all federal and state law. And so the meaning of that is established federal and state law, not law that's currently under question. So the aspects that are currently under question, we're essentially following what the NMSBA policy director is recommending, which is that we don't actually implement those. That's why he's calling this a draft, not final.
Okay, as long as we're in compliance and we're having this log, then I vote yes.
Okay.
Motion passed.
Okay, so we're on to item 3, executive session.
With respect to that, since you guys have voted, I don't think we need to go into executive.
Okay.
That was there in case you wanted to ask me more legal questions.
Okay.
So if I may, Madam Secretary, because of the acceptance and the vote and the motions that were made to carry,
I
The-
I have one concern. I think we need to do this executive session.
Okay.
okay.
Bye. So can we do that in here? Okay.
So the
3A, convene an executive session discussion or limited personnel matters regarding the board's goals and expectations of the superintendent as permitted under NMSA 1978, Section 10-15-1H2 of the New Mexico Open Meetings Act. Discussion pertaining to threatened or pending litigation regarding the Title IX litigation and policies as permitted under NMSA 1978, Section 10-15-1H7 of the New Mexico Open Meetings Act.
Motion.
Second.
Gary motioned and Marion second. So we'll have a vote. Montoya,
Yes.
Board Member So,
Yes.
Secretary Wells?
Yes?
I vote yes. President Haskell?
Yes.
Okay. Reconvening in open session. Stated that the board has discussed in executive session only the subject identified in the agenda as the reason for which the meeting was closed. Discussion on limited personnel matters regarding the board's goals and expectations of the superintendent as permitted under NMSA 1978, Section 1015-1H2 of the New Mexico Open Meetings Act, discussion pertaining to threatened or pending litigation regarding Title IX litigation and policies as permitted under NMSA 1978, Section 1015-1H7 of the New Mexico Open Meetings Act.
Motion.
Oh, I did. Okay. That one I didn't. Okay.
That's what the echo was.
Oh. Motion,
Motion.
Second?
and Secretary Wells second, and we'll do a vote. Board Member Montoya,
Yes.
Board Member So, Secretary Wells,
Yes?
President Haskey,
Yes.
and I vote yes. Board Member So, we're voting. Okay. His mic keeps going on and off.
Yes.
Okay, all right. Thank you, and now a motion to adjourn the special school board meeting.
I so
Motion.
moved.
Before we adjourn, weren't we supposed to sing happy birthday to Suzette? As
After?
president? Or with laughter? Either way.
Let's sing happy birthday.
Okay, let's go.
Before the adjournment, we have a 39th birthday from yesterday. 25th birthday. President Haskey.
25th plus. Happy birthday to you, happy birthday to you, happy birthday, dear Suzette, happy birthday to you.
Oh,
Cha,
thank
cha,
you.
cha.
That was
She's
cute.
gonna cry.
Okay, motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Second,
And board,
I vote yes.
Birthday girl says yes.
board members Montoya,
Yes.
board member So,
Yes.
Secretary Wells,
what are we doing?
to adjourn.
Just say yes.
Yes. I
And
thought we already did that.
President Haskey,
Yes.
and I vote yes. Good night.
Meeting adjourned.
Next board